bit behind, but now we are going to wrap up our look at the first edition Pathfinder Investigator. Hello there everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Finally having something like a more consistent and tolerable sound to my voice. I've been sick, the kids have been passing it all back and forth with each other, and now on to me. Kind of seems like it was bound to happen when the middle child sneezes in your face when he's asking you a question, but I digress. Today we are going to be looking at the overall strategy and tactics that we have for this build in the Investigator for first edition Pathfinder. And man, it's been a hell of a learning experience so far. I've really enjoyed digging into this class. I think it's quite a lot of fun, and honestly, at this point, I'm just kind of disappointed one of my friends hasn't picked up this class and started running with it already. Would have been absolutely great, especially with the kind of campaigns I really like to run. But before we get into all of that, our little bit of a breakdown on what we're going for overall and what this class seems to be predisposed to. If you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down there to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now we'll start getting into this. So, what do we know about this class so far? After everything we've gone through and everything we've put together. So, this is definitely a class that's meant to be a complete and total skill monkey through and through. You have access to all of the knowledge skills. Your inspiration class ability readily and easily lends itself to boosting your skill checks on any of the number of skills that you have access to. Several of your class abilities, particularly through your investigator talents, open up more skills or make it so you don't have to spend any inspiration points on dice that you roll to boost your skill checks. So all the way right there, that really lets you know where one of your class's biggest strengths is going to be. Just pumping out really high results on several different skills. This is going to make you a walking library, on par with, if not better than, the Bard, which is the classic class that just seems to know and have access to everything in terms of knowledge and skills. Not only that, but this is a class that's also built around getting into a melee. Sure, you only have a D8 for hit points. It's not terrible, but it's not the best either. And you're in light armor, so that's going to predispose you to relying on your dexterity to some degree, unless you're going to be spending feats on heavier armor types, like getting medium armor proficiency, as an example. So those will be examples of deviating from that, of building into your class a little bit differently. But as it is with what we've done so far, you're going to want to rely on your dexterity score for boosting your armor class. And because it's going to boost your armor class, you're also boosting your initiative, several of your dexterity based skills, your reflex saves, and also your touch armor class, as an example. So dexterity ends up being a pretty good stat for you to want to rely on. That said, we don't want to neglect our intelligence score, since that's also our spellcasting stat. Allows you to know more formula, have better save DCs for whatever extracts you might deploy against opponents, although many of them are going to be geared more towards buffing yourself or possibly your allies if you pick up the infusion talent. Now, with that said, though, your other class abilities, though, also are suited towards melee. For example, again, inspiration. You can eventually apply that to your combat skill, in particular using things like studied combat and studied strike in conjunction with your inspiration ability. Studied combat gives you bonuses to hit pretty dang reliably, and then studied combat adds on a lot of precision damage dice. So you're definitely focused on getting into the thick of fighting, although you're not going to want to be brawling it out with all the chaff, or at least you don't want to be spending all of your inspiration fighting your way through the mooks, the goons, the run-of-the-mill minions, the goblins, the orcs, the whatever rank and file soldiers of the evil overlord that you might be facing. You're not going to want to be burning all of your abilities on them. You don't want to be boosting uh, all of your combat prowess through your extracts just on those fights, unless they're going to be long lasting ones, something that's going to last 10 minutes a level, an hour a level. Then you can get through several combats using one of those abilities as an example. But you're going to really want to save a lot of your bigger buffs and a lot of your combat abilities for those bigger engagements, for when you're going up against significant threats. And it should be relatively easy to figure that out, especially with the skill checks that you have in place. And your skill checks work in conjunction nicely with your combat abilities, because being able to identify an opponent's weaknesses, any abilities that they might be using, definitely going to be hugely useful. And to aid with all of that, to help supplement, don't forget that you could pick up use magic device and pick up a trait that allows you to use it with your intelligence score rather than charisma, which we are dumpstering. So that can help you to identify weaknesses, so you know what extracts to prepare and you know what buffs you need in place in order to be able to more capably deal with the threat, especially if you need to maneuver and get in close to them. Being able to dimension door or step around or just fly over obstacles that are conceivably going to be in your way can be a huge advantage, can be a great way for you to get close to important targets like enemy spellcasters. Those are going to be some of the most significant threats, and your precision damage dice really lends itself well to dropping that kind of a target. And to that end, that's also why we haven't ignored our strength entirely. Just even at a 13 there, that's only a +1 to your damage anytime that you hit the target, but it opens up feats like power attack, which can scale pretty nicely. And sure, early levels it might not be something you're going to get the most use out of, because you only have that 3/4 base attack bonus progression. You're not getting attack bonus at the same rate or scale that a fighter or a barbarian does, but studied combat helps to ease that quite a bit and even outpaces the penalties that you might be taking. So the trade-off there can be very, very well worth it, especially if you're using that in conjunction with the Vital Strike, which is adding additional damage dice. So additional damage dice, a flat, solid boost to your damage through power attack and having a +1 bonus to strength, with everything else that you have in place there, can add up to a significant amount of damage, particularly if you're targeting something squishier like a wizard or a sorcerer. Those targets can ill afford to eat the kind of damage that you're going to be dishing out. So this makes you ideal to taking out those targets early on. Also, speaking of dealing damage, the inspired weapon enhancement that I had mentioned before, it was pointed out to me that I had made a mistake. I had read it and I reread it a couple of times to make sure I had it right, because I said it added to the attack bonus. It actually adds to your damage, which that's huge. That's wildly huge. The only real limitation to it is that you have to use it on a specific type of weapon like a rapier or a sword cane. There's a couple of other options, but given that sword cane is what we're using for this build, it just seemed to fit to me. I really liked it. It's not the most optimal choice, but it's still one that works really well, and because you can put the inspired enchantment down on it and get an additional damage boost out of it, I figure that comes out, you still come out a little bit ahead there anyways. And it's a nice concealable weapon that's perfect. It fits overall with this Sherlock Holmes-esque sort of build that we've gone for, or at least what I imagine Sherlock to be like. But anyways, point being, this all comes together really nicely. So you're not somebody that's meant to be brawling it out with every single last person in the middle of the fight. Your job is to surgically and precisely pick out your targets, have your buffs in place to make sure you are an insane combat threat, especially if you're using anything to elongate your reach, increase your size. Increasing your size also increases the size of the damage dice that you're using as well. So that will pair very nicely with Vital Strike and make that so much better. And top it off with with several of the different talents that we've selected for being an investigator. You are increasing the size of your inspiration dice from d6s to d8s, and then rolling multiple d8s and taking the better result. And you're being able to do this at reduced costs of inspiration that you're having to burn on your attacks and several of your different skill checks. So you're getting more mileage out of your inspiration ability. All in all, this class's abilities work together very synergistically. Now, this is, of course, the fact that we are focusing more on melee, and I think that's what this class really lends itself towards really easily, because while you do have a good dexterity score, and that does make it possible for you to be a pretty solid archer using ranged attacks, you still have to select class abilities that allow you to use your studied combat and studied strike at a range, and those ranges are inherently limited to a certain degree. So while you can still be a great archer, I do think that this class is better off working as a melee build, for the same reason that we're not going to be focusing on our extracts abilities, on the different formulae that we're able to make. You only go up to 6 spell level, so you're not getting to the tippy top absolute highest and most powerful abilities that most spellcasters are able to unlock. You're not bad, not by any stretch. 3rd through 6th level spells, you can do amazing things with those, and you have some interesting options for 1st and 2nd level as well. So you've got great options and great utility there, but you're not going to be relying solely on those, because you have your skills, you have your extracts, you have your abilities in combat. All of it kind of has to come together here, and you have to think about how you're playing. That's true for any class, but especially with this, being able to figure out how to identify your targets, their abilities ahead of time, preparing for them. It's all going to come together very, very nicely if you're able to do that. So with this build, you're definitely focused on melee. You're going to be making great use of your inspiration ability when it comes to your skills and all of your skill checks. And the fact that you can also apply this to your saves as well means that even if you have some saves that aren't the best, or the stats just aren't supporting them as good as they could, you still have some options for working your way around that. And then the items that we have selected here, the different items and equipment that we have picked out as things to look out for or purchase or create for yourself, you're going to be doing so many different things so effectively, so capably. But this is a class that is definitely built in mind for a lot of subterfuge themed campaigns. Definitely you're going to be focused more on being in urban locales. You're going to be focused on interacting more with people, investigating these schemes and the like. You can still get out there and adventure with the best of them, but you're still more ideally suited to more cloak and dagger styled adventures, which is my favorite kind of adventure and story to run for the people that I DM for. But it's all going to depend just a little bit. So always check with your DM, see generally what they're going for, because they can't just spoil it all for you. But ideally, if you tell your DM you want to play the Investigator, you're looking at this kind of class and the kind of build and theming that you're going for with your character, your DM will probably adjust some things to help make your character fit in, feel useful, feel capable, and it shouldn't be too hard for the Investigator, because those skill checks are always going to come in handy. You're always going to need to identify terrain features, traps, monsters, different abilities and spell effects, and the fact that if you pick the trait that lets you use use magic device with your intelligence instead of charisma, your utility goes through the roof at that point. I mean, you're able to make use of so many different magic items to help supplement your abilities. Like, if you pick up a wand to cure light wounds, that's after fight healing galore for you and your allies. And your party's cleric or paladin or whoever's supposed to be the quote unquote traditional healer, it's not all just going to be on them to heal everybody. They don't have to burn up quite so many spell slots because you have that added utility and value that you bring to your team. And the fact that you deal precision damage, well, you're essentially taking the rogue's place at that point. And because you have a good dexterity score and you're wearing light armor, you're going to be fairly capable at stealth and be able to get into position to deal deadly amounts of damage to those vulnerable targets that would otherwise wreak havoc on you and your allies. So definitely this is a class where you're going to have to think a bit about how you're playing, but everything about this class comes together and works really nicely together, pretty magnificently. In fact, there's only like one ability that I could think of that was bad, and it's even like, it's not even bad in a way that impacts how you play. It's not anything that really detracts from the class overall. It's just bad in comparison to everything else around it, and the fact that your inspiration ability easily eclipses it, like, and the fact that you have a good intelligence score and all your knowledge skills are going to be great to begin with. So yeah, that's basically my take on this class and on this build, on what in theory you should be doing overall. But again, there's so many ways that you could tweak this and build it, when just off of the investigator talents alone. Like, you could really lean a lot more into the alchemist talents that you can pick up through the investigator talents options and really do some interesting things with it. And this doesn't even get to the different subclass options with the different alternate features for the investigator class. So yeah, there's a lot to play around with this, and I definitely encourage you to just experiment and just remember that this guide is just a guide. I mean, my final assessment of it here can't even really be called final because there's still so much to learn. I keep going around, I find a different guide, or I find a different forum, or I just go through the system reference document and I find other spells or feats that seem like maybe that would be interesting to work with. So definitely play around with it, and most importantly of all, have fun. Just have fun with this character and this class that you're putting together. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? I'm sorry that it took me so long to get around from it, but my throat's already feeling worse. I feel like my voice is getting worse the longer we go on, so we're going to wrap it up here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Hit those like or dislike buttons, and remember, if you've made it this far, you must have enjoyed something despite my sickly nature at this moment. So why not go down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. Join that roster of legendary heroes and alumni of our storied institution. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time. Good gaming to you all, and you all have yourselves a good night.